Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going deep on one of the biggest mysteries ever, I guess you can say, the JFK assassination. We're going to zero in on Officer J.D. Tippit's death and look at some witness accounts that you don't always hear about. Our sources today are really interesting. We're going to be looking at Volume 14, Issue 3 of the Dealey Plaza Echo.
Interesting.
Yeah, and one article that really caught my eye was this one, was Tippit, a Bent Cop, by Alaric Rosman. And Rosman actually suggests that Officer Tippit might have been involved in some shady stuff. Just, before we really get into it, it's important to remember that the Warren Commission, the people who officially investigated the assassination, they concluded that Oswald acted alone in killing Kennedy and Tippit. But Rosman kind of challenges this finding, and he presents a case for why we should question Tippit's role that day.
Yeah, the Warren Commission's findings have been contested for decades, and Rosman's theory just adds another layer to the puzzle. He gives 5 reasons why Tippit might have been a bent cop. A corrupt police officer.
Oh, wow. So what's his first point?
He starts by highlighting the differences between what eyewitnesses said the guy who shot Tippit looked like and how Oswald actually looked. Some witnesses said the gunman was way taller and heavier than Oswald, which makes you wonder if Oswald was really the shooter.
Yeah, that is weird.
It's a big detail that's fueled tons of conspiracy theories. If Oswald didn't match the description, then who did?
Right.
And why would witnesses give bad info?
Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So what's his next point?
His second point is about how Tippit was killed, especially the shot to the head. He says that this execution-style killing kind of looks more like a gangland hit than something a lone gunman would do.
Oh, wow. So like a professional hit.
Yeah, exactly. Even the House Select Committee on Assassinations, the group that reinvestigated the assassination in the 70s, they thought this was important too. They thought it could point to a more planned-out hit.
Wow. So even they thought that was sus.
Right.
Okay, so what else does he say?
Well, his third point is that Tippit was often seen outside of his assigned patrol area. There were a lot of witnesses, including a cab driver named William Scoggins, who saw Tippit in District 91, which was far from his own District 78. Apparently, he was so well known there that some people even called him Mr. Friendly.
Mr. Friendly. That's a weird nickname for a cop, especially one who might be crooked.
Yeah, it's a strange one. It makes it seem like he was really familiar with that community, more than you would expect from just regular patrols.
Yeah, so it makes you wonder, what was he doing in District 91 so often?
Exactly. Was he meeting with informants, doing some undercover work, or was there something shadier going on?
A lot of questions. What about his fourth point?
His fourth point focuses on Tippit's movements on November 22nd, the day of the assassination. Rosman really goes into detail about where Tippit was that day, leading up to the encounter with Oswald, and he points out how unusual his behavior was. It seems like he was all over the place that day, not following his usual routine at all.
That's interesting. So was he maybe following orders? Or was he doing his own thing?
We don't know for sure. Maybe he was even being led into a trap. Rosman wants us to think about all these possibilities.
Oh, yeah, that's crazy. Okay, so what's his final point?
His last point is about the Dobbs House restaurant. This restaurant was miles away from Tippit's assigned area, but he was a regular there. And to make things even more interesting, a waitress who used to work there, a woman named Mary Ada Dowling, claimed that she saw Tippit and Oswald in the restaurant together at least once.
Really? That's a pretty big coincidence.
It is. What's fascinating is the possible connection between all these places. District 91, the Dobbs House restaurant, and then where Tippit was killed. If these visits were connected somehow, what was the reason?
Yeah, what was he doing?
Were they meeting points for some illegal activities or places where Tippit was doing things outside of his police work?
That's a tangled web for sure.
Yeah.
Rosman's theory is definitely interesting. But we got to remember, it's just a theory.
Yeah, we need to look at all the evidence before jumping to any conclusions.
Right. So we have these strange movements, shooting that doesn't quite add up, and witnesses who say different things. Rosman's theory, even though it's controversial, makes you wonder about Officer Tippit's role that day. What stands out to you the most about his argument?
What really gets me is how many inconsistencies there are in Tippit's behavior. It's hard to just brush them off as coincidence, especially when you consider the timing and how unusual everything was around his death.
Yeah, I agree. It makes you wonder if there's something more to the story, something we haven't been told. And that leads us to another great article in this issue of the Dealey Plaza Echo. Chris Galley wrote this piece about the acoustics evidence. It really digs into the science behind the assassination debate.
Yeah, the acoustics evidence was a big reason why the HSCA thought there was a conspiracy. They thought it meant there was another shooter in Dealey Plaza.
Okay, so to understand why that's important, we need to back up a bit.
Mm-hmm.
The Warren Commission looked at the Zapruder film and other evidence and said that the 3 shots came from the Texas School Book Depository, you know, where Oswald was.
Mm-hmm.
But the HSCA looked at things again years later, and they used a dictabelt recording from a police motorcycle. And they said this dictabelt had 4 gunshots on it, including one from the grassy knoll.
Right, and that totally contradicted the Warren Commission. It suggested a more complicated situation,
Yeah.
maybe even multiple shooters and a planned attack.
Wow.
But Scally says in his article that the acoustics evidence has problems too. There are some serious challenges to whether it's actually valid.
Like what?
For example, Scally says that some of the original dictabelts are missing from the National Archives, including the important one the HSCA used.
What? How can they just be gone?
I know, it's really concerning. Those dictabelts were crucial evidence, and now we can't even be sure that the HSCA's analysis was accurate.
That's crazy. So are there any other problems with the dictabelts?
Yeah, there are doubts about whether some of them are even the originals or just copies.
Yeah.
Which makes things even more confusing.
So we can't even be sure if we're looking at the right recordings.
Right.
Wow. That's a mess.
It really is.
What else does Scally talk about?
He also brings up the photographic evidence, or rather the lack of it. He mentions researchers like Dale Myers, who say that the photos contradict what the HSCA said about which motorcycle the recording came from. The HSCA said it was Officer R.B. McLean's motorcycle, but Myers says the pictures show it wasn't. So that casts even more doubt on their findings.
So if it wasn't McLean's motorcycle, then whose was it?
Exactly.
Mhm.
And why does the audio not match up with the photos?
Yeah, that's a big problem.
It is.
What else did Scally say?
He also mentions something called crosstalk, which is when signals from different radio channels get mixed up, in this case. You can hear an order from a different police channel on the same channel with the supposed gunshots. So now we have to question if those sounds are really what we think they are.
So maybe they're not even gunshots.
It's possible the crosstalk makes it hard to be sure about where the sounds came from and when they happened.
Okay, so we have missing dictabelts, maybe some fake ones.
Yeah.
Photos that don't match the audio,
Hmm.
and crosstalk. What
Wow.
else is there?
Well, there's also the problem of trying to repeat the HSCA's work. The original digital copy of that key dictabelt is gone, and the recordings from their reconstruction are in bad shape. So it's really hard, maybe even impossible, to do the analysis again and see if their findings hold up.
So basically, we can't check their work.
Pretty much.
Wow, that's a problem.
It is. It makes people doubt the acoustics evidence even more.
Right.
If we can't double check their work, it's hard to trust their conclusions.
Okay, so let me get this straight. We have missing dictabelts, possible duplicates, photos that don't match, crosstalk. And we can't even replicate the analysis. It sounds like the acoustics evidence is falling apart.
That's one way to put it.
So what does this mean for the conspiracy theory?
Well, the acoustics evidence was a big part of that theory. But now that it's being questioned, it's harder to say for sure if there really was a second shooter.
So maybe we'll never know for sure what really happened in Dealey Plaza.
It's possible. With all this conflicting information, it might be a puzzle we can never solve completely.
Wow, it makes you think.
It does.
The JFK assassination. It's like this mystery that never ends.
It really is. It's been over 60 years, and we're still asking the same questions. Who was responsible? Was there a conspiracy? What really happened in Dallas?
Yeah, it's crazy. We've looked at the theory that Tippit might have been dirty. We've seen how the acoustics evidence might not be so strong. And we've even talked about some of the witnesses
Yeah.
and how their stories haven't always been heard. So
Yeah.
where does all this leave us?
I think it shows us just how complicated the JFK assassination really is. It's an event with so many sides, so many different points of view, and so many unanswered questions. It's not a simple puzzle with an easy answer. It's more like a maze with twists and turns and dead ends.
A maze, huh?
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it. So out of everything we've talked about today, what's the one thing you want our listener to remember?
I think the most important thing is to think critically about this,
Yeah.
and really any historical event. Don't just take the official story as fact. Dig deeper. Look at things from different angles. Think about the evidence and come to your own conclusion.
That's so important.
It is.
It's easy to get caught up
in the emotions. the conspiracy theories,
Yeah.
and all the dramatic stories.
Right.
But we have to stay grounded, look at the facts, weigh the evidence, and form our own opinions.
Exactly.
And remember, history isn't set in stone. It's always being reinterpreted and re-examined as new evidence comes up and old ideas are challenged.
So to our listener out there,
Yeah.
as you keep learning about the JFK assassination or any other part of history that interests you, remember, question everything, look at all sides, and never stop searching for the truth.
That's right. The truth might be hard to find. It might be hidden under years of stories and different accounts, but trying to find it, the journey of discovery, that's what makes history so interesting.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this part of our deep dive into the JFK assassination. We hope you learned something new today and that it made you think about things in a different way.
Yeah, and hopefully it made you want to learn even more.
Exactly. Now, let's move on to some of those witness accounts that we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, let's hear what they had to say about that day.
All right, so let's talk about some of these witness accounts.
Sure.
There's this one figure that really caught my eye, the Black Dog Man. He's mentioned in Mark Bridger's article in the Dealey Plaza Echo. He shows up in a few photos taken right before the assassination, kind of urbing in the background, near the grassy knoll. And there's been a ton of speculation about who he is and whether he was involved at all.
Yeah, the Black Dog Man is definitely intriguing. He's one of those figures that really gets people thinking. Bridger talks about a few different theories about him, some more believable than others. One idea is that he's just Emmett Hudson, the groundskeeper at Dealey Plaza. We talked about him earlier. He was definitely there that day. And maybe he was heading towards the knoll to get a better view of the motorcade.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But wouldn't someone have recognized him if it was Hudson? I mean, he worked there.
You'd think so, right? But the photos aren't very clear. And the figure is kind of hidden, so it's hard to say for sure who it is. Plus, everyone was probably focused on the motorcade and not really paying attention to the people in the background. You know, it's a chaotic moment. It would be easy to miss details.
Yeah, that's true. But it's weird that he's never been identified, right? It keeps the mystery alive, and it makes you wonder if there are other explanations.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting. Some researchers think the Black Dog Man might have been a second gunman. Bridger talks about this too. The way he's positioned in the photos, being so close to the grassy knoll, and the fact that no one knows who he is, it all adds to the theory.
That's a scary thought. But if he was involved in the assassination, wouldn't he have tried to be more hidden? Standing out in the open seems like a dumb move for an assassin.
It does seem strange, but some people think he was meant to be seen. Maybe he was a distraction to take attention away from the real shooter, or maybe he was there to provide cover fire or create some kind of diversion.
Those are interesting ideas.
Right.
But we also have to remember that this theory is based on how people interpret the photos.
Of course.
And that can be subjective.
Definitely.
Pictures can be misleading.
Absolutely.
Especially when they're blurry and taken from far away.
Yeah. We can't jump to conclusions based only on what we see. We need to consider everything we know, look at different viewpoints, and be open to the possibility that the Black Dog Man might just be some random guy who happened to be there.
Yeah, a total coincidence.
Right.
It's like a real life Where's Waldo, but with way higher stakes.
Huh. Yeah.
And you know what? The Black Dog Man isn't the only one in those photos. Bridger also mentions a black man and a red top man standing near the steps of the knoll during the assassination.
Oh, yeah. Those two guys, they add another layer to the whole thing. They were right there during the assassination. But no one's ever figured out who they are. And after all the investigations and media coverage, that's pretty surprising.
Yeah, you'd think someone would have recognized them, or that they would have come forward and told their story.
Right, especially if they were just innocent bystanders.
Yeah, exactly.
But Bridger points out some things that make it more complicated. He mentions this witness named Marilyn Willis, who told a researcher named Josiah Thompson that she saw a young boy on the grassy knoll crying. The boy said he saw a man pick up part of his skull.
Wait, what? Part of his skull? What does that even mean?
I know, it's a gruesome detail. And it adds another layer of mystery to everything. It actually connects to another article in this issue that talks about a bone fragment that was found near the grassy knoll the day after the assassination.
So maybe that bone fragment is what the boy saw being picked up. But what does that have to do with the black man or the red top man?
We don't know for sure, but it's possible that one of them is the person who picked up the fragment. Maybe they were in shock, or they wanted to help, or even hide evidence.
Yeah, that makes their presence even more suspicious.
Definitely.
And if they were involved somehow.
It raises even more questions.
Right.
Bridger also mentions another interesting thing. A witness named Charles Brem said he saw a man running away from the picket fence on the grassy knoll right after the shots.
Really?
Yeah.
So do you think that could be the same guy the boy saw picking up the bone fragment? Could it be the black man or the red top man?
It's possible. We don't have enough information to say for sure.
It's hard not to try and connect the dots, though. Especially since these guys were never officially identified.
I know what you mean. It's weird that they stayed anonymous, even after all the investigations. It makes you think.
Yeah. Were they intentionally ignored? Did their stories not fit with the official narrative? Or maybe they just stayed quiet because they were scared.
Fear can be a powerful thing, especially in a case like this. It was huge and controversial.
Right.
Witnesses often face a lot of pressure, scrutiny from the public, and even threats.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So it's possible these guys, if they saw something important, chose to keep quiet to protect themselves and their families.
It's sad to think that people might have been silenced. So we have these three figures: the black dog man, the black man, and the red top man. All of them are mysteries, and they might hold key pieces of the puzzle. Their presence, along with the bone fragment and the guy running away, all suggest that there's more to this story than the Warren Commission told us.
Exactly. It shows that even after all these years, we still don't fully understand what happened that day in Dealey Plaza.
Right.
And it reminds us that we need to listen to everyone's story, even the people who are usually ignored.
Speaking of people whose stories need more attention, Bridger also talks about how Emmett Hudson's accounts of the assassination changed over time.
Right.
The groundskeeper, who some people think is the black dog man.
Yeah, his story's really interesting because it changed a lot.
So what did he say at first?
Well, right after the assassination, he told the Dallas police that the shots definitely came from behind and above me, which means the grassy knoll.
Wow.
So that seems pretty clear-cut.
But then what happened?
Well, 8 months later, when he testified to the Warren Commission, his story was different. He kind of backtracked on his first statement and said the shots might have come from behind the motorcade, which would support the lone gunman theory.
That's a big change.
It is.
Why would he change his story like that?
Well, there's a lot of time between his statements. 8 months, memories can fade, details get mixed up, and people can influence what you remember.
Right.
Plus, we have to think about the situation. When he talked to the Warren Commission, he was under oath, being questioned by these powerful people who all wanted to prove the official story.
Yeah.
So it's not hard to imagine that he might have felt pressure to change his story to fit what they wanted to hear.
It's messed up to think that
Yes.
someone might have been forced to change their story,
Yeah.
especially in a case this important.
It makes you wonder if other witnesses felt pressured too.
Yeah. How many other stories might have been changed?
It's hard to say.
It makes you question everything.
It does.
This whole thing is so complicated.
It really is.
History isn't always neat and tidy.
No, it's not.
It's often messy, with different accounts, changing stories,
Huh.
and questions that never get answered.
That's true.
And sometimes it's those unanswered questions, those things that don't quite add up, that make us keep searching for the truth.
Exactly.
That's what we're doing here today. We're trying to put together all these pieces, the evidence, the witness accounts, the things that challenge the official story, to understand what happened in this crucial moment in history.
It's like a process of discovery, uncovering hidden connections, questioning what we thought we knew. We
Yeah.
might never have all the answers,
Yeah.
but it's the journey, the search for understanding that matters.
And on that note, let's shift gears a bit
Yeah.
and talk about, well, something else that's been on my mind about all this. It feels like we've just scratched the surface. You know, every time we dig deeper, we uncover more questions than answers. But that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like this never-ending mystery. Each detail, each inconsistency, each unanswered question just pulls you in further.
It's true. The JFK assassination is one of those events that just keeps people captivated. It's been over 6 decades, and we're still trying to figure out the same basic things. Who did it? Was there a conspiracy? What really happened that day in Dallas?
It's crazy, right? We've talked about the idea that Tippit might have been corrupt. We've looked at how the acoustics evidence might be flawed. And we've even discussed some of the witnesses and how their stories haven't always been heard. So after all that, where do we stand?
I think it shows us That the JFK assassination is way more complex than we often think. It's an event with so many layers, so many different perspectives, and so many questions that we still don't have answers to. It's not a simple puzzle with one solution. It's more like a giant labyrinth
Yeah.
with twists and turns and dead ends everywhere.
It's easy to get lost in all the detail.
It is.
So after this deep dive, what's the main thing you want our listeners to take away?
I think the most important thing is to approach this and any other historical event with a critical and open mind. Don't just believe the official story without questioning it. Dig deeper. Look at different perspectives. Consider all the evidence. And then come to your own conclusions.
That's great advice.
Thanks.
It's so important to remember that we need to think for ourselves.
Absolutely.
It's easy to get caught up in the emotions, the conspiracy theories, all the dramatic stories.
Right.
But we have to stay grounded, look at the facts, and form our own opinions based on the evidence.
I agree. And we also have to remember that history is not fixed. It's always being reinterpreted and re-examined as new information comes to light, and odd ideas are challenged.
So to our listener, as you continue to explore the JFK assassination or any other historical event, remember to question everything. Look at all sides of the story and never stop searching for the truth.
Well said. The truth might be hard to find, buried under layers of time and conflicting accounts.
Right.
But it's that pursuit of truth, that journey of discovery, that makes history so captivating.
I love that.
Thanks.
Well, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into the JFK assassination. We hope you enjoyed this exploration and that it gave you some new insights.
Yeah, and hopefully it challenged some of your assumptions.
Exactly. And maybe even sparked a desire to learn more.
It's a fascinating case.
It really is.
There's always something new to discover.
All right, everyone. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep the conversation going.
See you next time.